Hi,
Hi,
we're live.
we're live. Hello everyone. I'm Indigo Dawn, and I'm here to talk with Mischa Byruck, about his work as a sexual integrity coach, consent educator, and also the workshops he's bringing to this 10-day event, this retreat called New Culture Summer Camp East, in July this summer. Do you want to say more about you, Mischa?
So yeah, for anybody watching, I'm a sexual integrity coach, and what that means is that I help people live their values in their sex lives, which is not always easy. I have a specialization in supporting men who have been called out or canceled. I do a lot of work with community accountability process and community reintegration and restoration. I like to say I put the men in amends. Uh, yeah, that's. I also am a kink and consent educator. I do workshops with Boundless and Bonobo Network here in the Bay Area. Those are two big consent and sex positive organizations around daddy dynamics and kink, and also just a big, like a lot around consent. And I'm really, really invested and interested in the discussion in general around how we interact with each other with more pleasure and more community, more connection, and less harm.
Yes. Um, and I want to say it's hard to be values aligned in any area of life, really. So I love your work.
It's so true. It's so true. It really is. It really is. I think that's one of the best things I've gotten from this work is just the humility to see how out of integrity most of us are in most places most of the time. And how hard it is to stay in integrity in an ongoing way. And I think that gives us I love I love the integrity, like being in integrity framework, because it's like it's not about being a good or bad person. It's, we're all just trying and doing our best, and most of us failing at least a little bit.
Yeah, totally. I guess a little about me. I'm a
Please.
somatic therapeutic coach, and that means I work with energies that live in the body and healing through somatic means on a cognitive, emotional, and embodied level towards empowerment and healing. And I'm also the program director for New Culture Summer Camp East. That is what's bringing us together. And it's this experimental community for community intimacy and personal growth and healing and changing the world and consent. So, would
Yeah,
you share more about that meeting place, like your work as it's intersecting with summer camp?
totally. So, the two major areas that um, I'm going to be teaching on, and that I think are the areas of intersection, are around consent and around community restoration. Which by which I mean after there's been conflict and a loss of trust, say harm or consent violation or an abuse of power by someone in a position of power, or something that's really created a schism within a community. How do you do individual and community repair? And I think this is like an incredibly important tool for resilience, and both preventatively and retroactively, right? So it's like it's really good to have good repair skills so that after like a small fuck up, you don't make it worse. And it's really good to have like a larger repair skills for after a giant schism to somehow crawl your way back to repair. To quote one of the most informative texts I've ever read from Mariam Kaba and Shira Hassan, on how to do transformative justice. Their workbook was called "Fumbling Towards Repair," which I just love because it's so indicative of the humility that you need to have to like really address conflict within community. Like we fumble in practice. Even the best of us, even the people that I respect the most, who have like started major restorative justice organizations and nonprofits and prison abolition nonprofits, who are like my heroes, are just like, we're just fumbling. We're all just doing our best. And that extends to presidents and inmates and anti-rape activists. We're all kind of just doing our best.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my another thing I do is the consent program director for Interfusion Festival, and also
Right.
at these new culture events, part of what weaves the culture of consent is not only to prevent consent incidents, that is harm through boundary crossings, which like you're doing the initial foundational consent workshop that hopefully will help build that culture, but also the processes to address it once harm inevitably happens, because
Inevitably.
we've all been socialized into domination culture, into rape culture. I have.
Yep.
And so it's important to, when we fuck up, how do we address it
Yep.
together? And I'm hearing you're also going into within the individual too.
Yeah, and I love that. Thanks for that. Thanks for teeing me up there. Um, I am a big believer in the importance of individuals who have done harm doing a lot of independent work before they come directly into contact with the person that they harmed. Um,
Mm,
I think jumping straight into a circle or mediation can actually cause a lot more harm and make everything a lot worse if the person who's done harm hasn't like taken the time to like really reconcile themselves with the reality of the harm that they've done. Um,
yeah,
and
totally.
that's what I do in my private practice a lot is support men who have done harm to just kind of get clear about the harm that they've done so that when they do, if they do come into a restorative conversation or interaction, that they're coming from a place of humility and accountability and dignity also, right? That there's not either a very harmful form of denial or minimalization or aggression, but also in a repair conversation, but also not a self-martyring, self-flagellating, I'm sorry, people-pleasing thing, which can also be damaging to trust because it doesn't feel authentic or real or actually, ironically, reparative to just flood the zone with apologies. There needs to be
Yeah.
and a nuance. So anyway, so I believe in that, and that's why I actually don't just focus on community-wide skills. I think it's actually really important for individuals to build this skill set. The other thing that's great about repair skills is that the better you are at repair, the more risks you can take in fun, sexy situations, right? Like if you have never done good repair, if you have no skills in that place, like it's a lot harder to take risks because you're like, I'm on the precipice of destroying my reputation and my community if I fuck up. You know, it's a lot better to like know that even like with a small fuck up, you like have done the work of like, no, like I know that if I fuck up, I'm not gonna take it like super personally. I'm gonna be able to show up for a repair conversation. I'm not gonna get into like a denial or an aggression stance. If someone says I harmed them, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, I'm here for that. Like I can show up for that. I have that in me. That
Yeah, I that's a deep insight. I just connected that to like every branch of my life.
really.
This um the capacity to show up authentically and fearlessly and confidently and centered and in the moment, and also practice self-love
Yeah.
in that case in connection, in
Yeah.
relationship, while cuddling someone, having sexy times, asking for what you want. That's the one piece. But for me, that also extends to my work as a leader and
Mm.
my work as a practitioner. And there's this idea of the only way to stay fully centered and move forward into the unknown, that is the space between, that is community space, that is connection space, uh,
Mhm.
is to take those risks. There has to be a trust that it'll be okay on the other end. And you're right, like um I've found that I will draw within the lines if I'm like, well, I'm afraid of making a mistake.
Yeah.
Whereas if mistakes are okay, then it's like, okay, I can go outside the lines, come back in and see what happens. And
I'm really glad that you mentioned that for leadership too, right? So because it for leaders especially, the safety extends to whoever they're a leader of.
yeah,
Right? Like I've gotten feedback time and time again, that um, if a community leader gives the impression that they're not going to that they're not going to be able to fuck up well, that if you tell them
yeah,
that they fucked up, they're going to get
yeah,
defensive and scared and angry, that even if they don't fuck up, their community will feel less safe.
totally.
Right? Because you're at this edge all the time. If I'm in a community being led by someone who I can't say, hey, like I didn't like the way you did that, then I'm gonna feel less safe, even if they don't actually do anything I don't like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
This
it's
healthy
so important.
feedback loop, the healthy repair process, I
Yeah.
think is crucial
And I
for,
teach this stuff to leaders all the time. Like
yeah.
it's like such a critical skill for leadership. And it's surprising to me and scary, how many leaders are bad at this.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it, because feedback often in like many homes, many parents don't know how to give feedback. There aren't these healthy repair processes. So there's just like a, you know, the rules or else. And feedback can be delivered as criticism a lot of the time too. I think in business structures, it's like, because feedback is so scary, feedback's only given when it needs to be because of something very bad is happening. Um, and so
Yep.
I think it comes like from the human need for that safety and security, and it can
Hmm.
also link into the sense of worthlessness, or like, oh, if I made a mistake, I'm a mistake. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot to unpack.
Or that there's something, I mean, there's not a, yeah. I mean, I don't want to get as, I'm noticing that there's some abstraction in this conversation. And whenever I watch these kinds of conversations, I'm always like, I'm grateful when things are more concrete.
Uh-huh.
And when we talk about things in a more concrete way. So,
Let's do it.
yeah. Um, so yeah, for instance, God, I'm trying to like pinpoint where to go there. Um, Well, you asked about the other kind of area, and we've talked about apologies, but the other area is consent.
Mhm.
And I think what I've noticed with consent education is that, well, there's actually some amazing new thinking happening in consent education, right now, that's turning away from um, a blanket exhortation towards like anything that's like everything must be enthusiastic, which is actually really interesting because like enthusiastic consent makes a lot of intuitive sense, that as a standard that everybody should be enthusiastic, about what they're consenting to, and I think that actually makes a lot of sense. The turn away from that is less about, being okay with, folks being, like maybe not enthusiastic, and more towards, even when things are consensual they can still be harmful. So to make things more concrete, like I've seen a lot of, um I'm a teacher and educator in sex positive scenes. I help and I support like people who do kink and big sex parties and stuff. And I've seen a lot of situations where a sexual interaction between two people is nominally consensual, even under the most rigorous consent standards, and is yet still really harmful. Um, and the consent narrative as it exists right now doesn't really have a space for understanding that. And that's a space that I, along with other, modern consent educators that I think I really respect, are really trying to carve a space out for, of just understanding that harm can happen even in consensual dynamics. Like,
Totally.
which sounds obvious when I say it out loud, but like it's really easy to think that, well, so long as it's consensual, right? And this is actually reinforced by our society. When you think about it, this is actually something that's like so embedded we don't even think about it. But like two consenting adults, right? That's literally our standard when we think about it societally. It's like, well, two consenting adults in their room, right? Well, like that's a nice standard, I guess, for the law, but it's not actually really useful um, for community. So if you want to be sexual in community, which I think a lot of our audience does, then a standard that goes beyond just two consenting adults is actually really important. And that standard should have a lot more to do with understanding what might be harmful rather than just what might be consensual.
Totally. And something this has me think of is teaching about the fawn response. And in fact, all of the trauma responses and some of the pitfalls of both verbal and nonverbal consent and how to navigate that. And yeah, not centering, okay, this box is checked, okay, this box is checked, okay, I'm not going to jail, but actually centering sustainable, joyful connection that like ideally is deeply pleasurable, meets both people's needs, is mutual. That's the best, that's the juiciest. And there's no harm, there's no trauma, there's no broken trust, because that actually it spoils the connection, the quality of the connection.
And I've seen situations where a person who is like a survivor of rape or assault will say, well, it wasn't that it wasn't consensual, it was just really harmful the way they did it. And it wasn't even, and this is actually even more confusing, it wasn't even that it wasn't pleasurable. And this is where shit gets real ugly, right? It's like what I teach is that it's not two separate circles of here's what's consensual and here's what's not consensual, bad, good, right? That's what we've been taught. It's three overlapping circles of what's consensual, what's pleasurable, and that's what's harmful. And those three circles overlap, which means that an interaction can be both pleasurable and harmful. It can be non-consensual and pleasurable. It can be consensual, pleasurable, and harmful all at the same time, which is just so hard. And so like I actually really invite that complexity. And I mean, like I break it down in the courses that I teach and make it more understandable so you can navigate that well. But just allowing, and I think it's really important, you allow for the possibility that an interaction could be pleasurable, consensual, and still harmful. Because that's actually the complexity of human interactions.
This reminds me of the conception of each human as composed of parts. Like one part is finding pleasure, and then another part might feel betrayed, or another part is not ready, even if they like this person. Or, I know for me, I only really want sex when I'm ovulating. So that's where my sexual part will be a hell yes. And other times it's like, yeah, whatever. Okay. And that doesn't mean I don't love the person, or it doesn't mean that I'm not having a good time. And it's really, really complex. And I love,
right? It's tough.
I'm really curious to see I hope you bring visuals.
I will bring visuals. I will bring visuals. And in case anybody watching, is curious about that, like a good example is like a massage that gets turned sexual, right? So it's a professional massage, but the massage therapist decides to like make it sexual, and then like the person getting massaged gets turned on and like kind of like acquiesces in that state of vulnerability, maybe is even turned on and excited about it, and like has like engages, maybe has sex with the massage therapist there, like during the massage, and it just turns sexual. And it's like, well, there was a power imbalance, right? But like the power imbalance even itself is complicated. The massage therapist is the service provider, so the client has power. They're the ones with the money. On the other hand, the massage therapist has power because the client was the one who's like naked and vulnerable. There's that. But like, let's say that, like, you know what? In that moment, I got turned on, and yeah, I wanted it. I was consenting. But then the next day, I just feel icky towards that massage therapist. I don't really want to interact with him anymore. I don't trust him. And like, what's going on there? And what's going on is that the sex was out of integrity in the context of the massage, in a professional context, right? Which is also like a violation of like all massage therapists, like for a reason, like guidelines. So it was consensual, it was pleasurable, but it was also harmful in the sense that it lost trust. And now the person doesn't trust the judgment of that massage therapist. It's like, yeah, that was fun, but I don't trust you anymore.
It's like, if I set up an agreement with you,
Mm-hmm.
will you fulfill that? Will you honor that? Or will you break it? Will you break the container that we both agreed to?
Absolutely. And I see so much of the harmful, pleasurable sex that I see that's consensual has to do with like, we established an agreement, but then you pushed it. And in the moment, I went with it. But like, I really wish you hadn't pushed me. I really, because what I was doing by setting a boundary was hoping that you would help me hold it instead of pushing me on it. And one of the reasons I think a lot of people don't understand this about boundaries, one of the reasons a lot of people, especially people who hold trauma in their bodies, set boundaries is because they don't trust them and say them out loud. Why it's such a good practice is because they don't necessarily fully trust themselves to hold that boundary without articulating it, right? That it might be really, if I know that in my body, it's not right for me to have penetrative sex right now, but like, I still want to engage with you. Like there's still a lot of desire in my body, right? If I don't necessarily trust myself to say no if you decide to like initiate penetrative sex. So it's nice for me to like initiate the boundary, state the boundary, and then trust that you'll hold it with me, that you won't initiate and force me to say no, because I might have a hard time saying no right in the moment, right? It's sex. It's like we all get caught up in it. So there's this invitation to co-managing each other's boundaries in sex in this really powerful way. That's part of the intimacy with sex, is like, help me take care of myself is one of the things that might be happening with a boundary setting. Help me.
And the connection.
Mm-hmm.
Help me trust you more. Help me feel more safe.
Oh, I love that.
More connected. Want to see you again.
Right.
Associate good things with you.
Lest we forget, right? Like that. Yeah. And this is also, God bless us, I keep on remembering that like so much of people's associations with sex, especially casual sex, is in the context of like not community, of one night stands and drunken bars and frat parties and Tinder dates and all this, like completely out of the context of community, out of the context of communal trust, pickup artist, Andrew Tate crap. And it is so depressing to me sometimes, but like, the beauty of being in sex positive community and learning these skills in very much in the context of what new culture is creating, is that you're aligning people's incentives in a really beautiful way. You're saying it's going to be beneficial to you in the long run for creating lots of great sexy connections within this community, to be slow, to be conscious, to be intentional, to honor people's boundaries, to listen, because what you do in one situation will like reverberate throughout your future interactions with this person, and you're likely to interact with them again. It will reverberate throughout the rest of the community as well. It will affect the vibe of the entire space that you're in. It will affect the vibe of the community. So your actions have consequences. And one of the worst parts of hookup culture is that actions often don't have consequences outside of just like whatever trauma one happens to inflict on the person you're in bed with, which is also horrific.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And there are leaders like myself, people who are holding that space and trying their very best to be easy to approach with reports. And there's these there's something Zeg Forum, a community process where people can share anything, the deepest of the deep or the shallowest of the shallow. And so people are sharing openly about the pleasurable, the joyful, the connecting, and the harmful, and the traumatic.
That's actually pretty new for me. I got to be humble there. Like I don't know a lot about Zeg Forum. I mean, I know of it, but I haven't experienced a lot of the kind of radical candor type sharing I mean, I've heard of them, of the dynamics you're describing. So much of, I guess, even what I teach and from the perspective that I come from has to do with like, is supporting individuals to develop the skills to have these individual conversations and encouraging people to have that individual resilience, so that you know that anybody you meet in this scene if you have a negative interaction with them, we'll be able to hold that. You'll be able to call them up. It won't have the energy of like, this person might gaslight me or socially punish me if I tell them something they don't want to hear. And I think that's also, I don't know, this is kind of a tangent, but like, I think it's partly informed by having been a big community leader in the past and having had that experience and having experienced the exhaustion and just like emotional kind of burnout that comes from trying to from implying that each individual community member should tell me every time they have even a tiny bit crunchy interaction. Because like I was like, as a leader of a 500 person sex positive community for a couple of years, I was like, I don't have the emotional space. I don't know how anybody could to like know about every little crunchy interaction. Like, please, y'all deal with some of these stuff yourself. Like, I want to encourage people to deal with the small stuff themselves. Just because,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
you know, I don't know, but like, I don't know. I'm making some assumptions about what Zeg means there.
Well, I think both are needed, the individual
Yeah.
skills as well as the community processes. I think both are really important to truly build joyful consent culture.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm really curious how your work is going to meld and dance and weave with ours, and really excited to meet you in person
Me too.
in less than 2 months.
Yeah.
So
Happening.
where can you be in person with us too? You could come to New Culture Summer Camp East. That is July 14th to 23rd. No one turned away for lack of funds. There's like a limitless scholarship budget. Everyone can who commits to make it work. We work it out with them. So
That's awesome. I didn't even know that about y'all. That's great.
yeah. So excited to see you, Mischa, there, and maybe some of y'all who watch this.
Yeah.
And
Come out east for my West Coast audience. I hope that happens.
yeah. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay. That's
signing
it.
off for now.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for arranging this, Indigo. I'm really looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
me too.
Okay.